Welcome, civic students. We're back here again. We gotta get a name for ourselves here or something like that, or maybe you guys could email us an idea of what we should call ourselves. But
Three Stooges probably would work.
But we're on chapter 20, and this is section 1. And if you can follow along here with the slides, we're going to be talking today about criminal and juvenile justice. Main idea, there are thousands of crimes committed in the United States each year. The crimes and their causes and what people think the system should do about crime vary. Things that we'll be covering today, we'll be talking about what assault is, what battery is, burglary, embezzlement, treason, and terrorism. So these are things that are going to be coming up that we'll be talking about in today's presentation.
Bad boys, what you gonna do?
All right, so the first thing that we're gonna look at here is Federal Bureau, the FBI, basically. These are from 2003, and it says more than 10 million property crimes take place. You guys probably are familiar with some of those kind of things. I know that there are different times that if you don't lock your car in Morris, Minnesota, people will go in and take whatever money you have or throw things around or destroy things. So things like that happen. And then it says nearly 1.5 million violent crimes happen. And they range from, an assault where someone's drunk and hits someone to domestic violence to like a sexual assault by a stranger. I mean, it varies in all kinds of ways, even murder. So those are the kind of things that are included.
I was hit by one of those crimes just a few years ago. A meth addict and dealer came through. They actually came into my house and went in the kitchen, and they took an iPad that was charging there and some money and whatnot. They took my wife's billfold, my son's tennis shoes and jacket, and his golf frisbees. So, but he got caught, and everything. He did a number of them. It was at my house and then a neighbor's house. He actually got a shotgun out of the garage, the Gullickson's house, Binzold's house, and around town. He kind of made a loop that started, coming up the hill to my house and over and around and then back to his own. But the cops were able to catch him. We had an investigation. I had to sign off on warrants to look in the iPad he stole. So there was a whole due process to it, and that's really what we'll be going over today. Right? And generally, there are more crime in urban areas. For example, like I talked about this person breaking into my house. For 25 years here in Morris, I never carried a key to my house. I never felt like I needed to lock my door or anything. But in the cities, growing up in the cities and whatnot, absolutely there was more. In fact, I remember one time I was visiting a friend in Minneapolis, and the first time I was going to their house, there was a little chalk outline on the corner of the street of a person's body and whatnot. And he goes, oh yeah, there was a shooting earlier this week. It was like no big deal to him, and I was like, a suburban dude. And yeah, it was. It was like, to me, a little bit of a freak out. All right? And the tragedy of crime is that it makes people more afraid. You're right. I do carry a key now in my house and whatnot that I didn't before this happened.
Well, we always lock our cars. We don't leave them unlocked ever.
Their homes. I know some people probably out there probably don't lock their homes. I know that people don't, but and I think like what you're saying, if all of a sudden somebody comes in to your house when it was unlocked, you're probably maybe going to change your mind about, maybe trusting society as much as maybe what you did in the past.
Absolutely. It's that the crime kind of took my freedom away. I'd like to have that faith in people. And I know, and it's terrible that this one person's actions made me lose faith in greater society in that sense. So that's the downside of crime. All right.
Crimes against people. Again, things that you can see on this slide: acts that threaten or hurt or possibly could end a person's life. There's a couple of terms here that you might want to pay close attention to. Assault. Assault, it says, is placing somebody in fear without actually physically contacting them. So an assault would be like, I'm going to hurt you, or I'm going to punch you, or possibly I'm going to take a gun, or I'm going to take a knife to you. That puts you at a fear. That's where assault comes in. And the second thing would be battery, and that's actually placing somebody in fear with the contact. So if you punch somebody, that's different than just threatening them. I mean, obviously you've made contact with them, and that's going to be deemed a different term, and that's where battery would be coming in.
Assault can also be things like stalking, because you are put in fear without the physical contact. So just by, following someone around and making them nervous and they're just always there, that's another form of assault. And kidnapping. I used to take my psych kids to the prison over in Appleton, and it was amazing. I didn't realize that kidnapping, which isn't a form of assault, it's if I would make Mr. Greenwald move from where he is to over across the room, that's kidnapping at a certain degree, because I forced them to move from one location to the next. Now, depending on if I had physical contact or didn't have physical contact, that would play a role in that crime there. But there's a lot of different variations on this that our civics book won't actually cover.
And don't forget, online is the new frontier of assault. With cyberbullying and whatnot, that could happen. So in strict senses of the term, if you do some cyberbullying, you could be considered being charged with assault. All right, next, we have crimes against property. And crimes against property are mostly stealing. All right. Burglary is like the illegal breaking into a building. All right, larceny is theft of property without using violence. And robbery then is a theft of personal property by force or a threat. It's like that your money or your life kind of thing is robbery. A cat burglar would be a larceny. And then there's also arson and vandalism.
And statistically, there's more crimes against property than actually people. So a lot of people, again, are just doing a lot of stealing or theft or things where you're not necessarily threatening somebody. And we kind of think that that's of kind of a lesser degree, that, I'm not going to get caught, so I'm going to take something from somebody. But that also, as we said, that's a crime.
And then arson, of course, is illegal, starting something on fire. The fire in Alexandria.
Was that arson?
I know it was being investigated. I haven't heard anything at this point about whether it is, but it is, of course, being investigated. The bar in St. Cloud.
Yeah. I don't think it's gone to trial yet, but the owner of the bar has been accused of arson, of burning his own building down. You're like, well, why would one want to burn your own building down? That's because most people on a building, they're going to have insured for whatever the value is, or a little bit more. And so some people choose then to burn their building down and get away with it, and then that way they can collect the insurance money on that building.
I think there was a famous place in Fargo too, by NDSU. That owner burned it down because he had it highly insured and whatnot.
Oh, what was that?
It's that big yellow restaurant.
Yeah, we've eaten there. They have good burgers. They had good burgers. Anyway, right. We digress. And then vandalism, of course, is just when someone damages someone else's property.
Absolutely. All right.
This is kind of interesting here, white collar crime, and kind of really gets overlooked many times. You can read on your slide, this is non-violent crimes often committed by office workers for business or personal gain. One of the words that kind of comes to mind is embezzlement. or embezzling money, that's stealing money that's been entrusted for your care. There are many different areas in which that could be used, where you're entrusted to take care of money. Maybe you're working at a church, for example. I know at our church it didn't happen, but I've heard of other churches where people have stolen money. People have stolen money from schools or maybe their own businesses and stuff, that people believe that they're not going to be caught. And then eventually maybe they're not caught for a while, but it continues to grow, and maybe it's a year or 2 or maybe 3 years, and finally they end up getting caught. And it's millions of dollars. So this is a crime. It's called a victimless crime, and I don't really necessarily know if it actually is victimless. Maybe if it's at a school, there could obviously be implications that us as students, as teachers, are going to be affected because of it.
Something for you guys to pay attention to in the news. Although this is not in the book, it is a white collar crime, and that's called insider trading. So it's when people, because of their jobs or positions, have access to information that's not public, and then they trade on the stock market. If you pay attention to the news, there were recently, because of the droppage in the stock market, there are a number of people who traded when they received that information, and a number of them are in Congress. Now, there have been people in Congress who are spending time in jail as a result of it. So pay attention to that. That's a white collar crime, and it's going to be interesting. It's not in the news big time right now, but it probably will come back.
And this is one of the things, and this has happened, with past presidents, even former presidents, obviously, that we know of, like Bill Clinton. You always have that authority or right to pardon people. And sometimes some of these people get pardoned for doing these white collar crimes and end up, in a sense, maybe it happens to be their friends or people that they know. And it's always kind of controversial when a president or a governor grants a pardon to these people.
Excellent. Victimless crimes are examples in the book are like drug use and gambling, and I kind of say no, not at all. And all of us teachers have seen, former students that get in trouble with drugs, and we see that ripple effect. Their families are hurting, their friends, the whole dynamic. So are there victims in these types of crimes? Absolutely, all the time. Gambling, totally, because you look at embezzlement, like you were talking about, where somebody is taking money from a school, and this has happened in our area, and they used it for gambling. Instead of that money being able to be used on your student education, this money has been skimmed off the top of the school and not seen, and then gambled away. But I think like OxyContin, prescriptions and whatnot recently are another example of how our health insurance we spend more on health insurance because people are abusing the healthcare system to get OxyContin for their addictions and whatnot. There are clinics in other states where you can actually just call in and could have gotten a pain reliever, and then it's just, what a mess. So yeah, these victimless crimes, there are victims, and they come from what's called unintended consequences from the people around them, that ripple effect that happens. So, getting back to white collar crimes too, a lot of people, white collars makes it kind of sound like it's not a bad crime, but the greatest thieves of all time have been white collar criminals. They have stolen billions in retirement funds, like Madoff, Bernie Madoff,
Yeah.
Right, had a Ponzi scheme where he was kind of paying off people and taking money and profiting all along the way, and there wasn't as much wealth there. Other companies like Enron that did this, and an original version of like MCI. Telecommunications did the same thing. They cooked their books to make them look better than they were, and then the bottom fell out, and people lost millions.
Well, or they changed the books for tax purposes, which, that's happened around here too. So
Right,
it is what it is, right?
there you go.
We have crime around here.
We do
I
have
mean,
crime.
it's just, that's the bottom line. Some of it crimes against the government, treason. If you remember back, maybe a little bit in my class, we talked about betraying one's country, or terrorism, and that's the use of violence by people or groups to get what they want from our society. I know in my particular classes, we talked about treason and terrorism. I don't know if you've had a chance to talk about those, but again, they are crimes.
Right? Causes of crime, poverty. When somebody is hungry, people become willing to steal to get it. There's an old saying my dad used to say was, when the watering hole runs dry, the animals look at each other differently. And that's true, and poverty is that watering hole drying up. And if you're not sure where, your next meal's coming from, crime looks like an option.
Right. Social change, changing values, it affects crime. Right now, people tend to be more accepting of smoking marijuana. So it's like, and it's been decriminalized, and in some states it's actually allowed, and in other states it's not allowed. And so that affects the crime rate too, because it's just how it's categorized. So changing values can affect things as well.
Right, look at the 18th and 21st Amendments to the Constitution, where the 18th, the United States went dry, no alcohol. And there's your social change. Well, that social change caused an increased spike in organized crime. And so people started to go, well, we better legalize more alcohol because we don't want to have this organized crime running the business. So it's always going to be an ebb and a flow.
Already talked a little bit about drug abuse, and, the ideas of using drugs, and maybe legalization of marijuana. I mean, that gets to be discussed. In our state, we have legalization for medical use. Other states have legalization for recreational use. This is being highly debated, whether or not this is a good idea or a bad idea. A lot of it obviously has to do with crime.
Right.
Permissive courts. Who would like to address permissive courts?
I think permissive courts, actually, this is probably the least, different political views might look at this differently, is what I'm trying to say. And so the courts right now are more permissive in that they're looking at a variety of reasons why people do things, and they tend to give people more chances. Like back in the 1970s and 80s, the courts were throwing the books at people, the highest possible sentence that they could get. And so right now, something that President Trump and Jared Kushner and other political leaders, governmental leaders are doing is that they're looking at incarceration. Like, are people in prison for a long period of time for nonviolent crimes? Should we get them out? there are people in states that are in prison for life because of the rule, 3 strikes and you're out, which is not permissive. The court was not permissive. But so they ended up selling small amounts of marijuana or something along that line 3 times. And so then the courts at that time said, you're going to spend the rest of your life in prison. And so there are people in prison for that. And now, so sometimes they haven't been as permissive and other times they are permissive. So depending on that.
Well, another thing that kind of brings up along those lines with the COVID-19, I know there's a lot of talk about some of the prisoners that have been in jail for life sentences and that have been, in a sense, I don't know, not changed, I suppose, in their behavior. What maybe the jail would feel as being non-violent anymore, to being rehabilitated, I think is the word that one would use about whether or not the court should allow those people back into our society to free up more beds, like we talked about earlier. I mean, if we end up going in from a recession into a depression, there may be more crime, and as a result, we're going to have to probably, unfortunately, there'll be more arrests. And it's just like, where do you put these people when the jails are already full? So there's a lot of discussions about it. Nothing at this point in time, I think, has been decided more than just people talking.
Right. And I think, in my classes, we did that. We discussed, why is justice defined as a blind lady with the scales, and the permissive courts. That's really where you see the scales. They go up and down, they change back and forth, and the courts are really a reaction to what's happening in our society and the values of our society. All right.
Not enough money for the police. I'm on the police commission. I can tell you that the city only has so much money. And although you might not feel, some people in the community don't feel that we need more police, we actually do. We forget that the police actually are typically considered like a first responder. They're the first ones at someone's home when someone's had a heart attack. So they get the 911 call, they go if they can, if there's an accident. So it's not always about some criminal activity. They get tied up doing different things, and they have to make a decision on, do I leave this to go to this location? And they just don't have enough money. And something else they don't have enough of is they don't have enough people who want to be police officers anymore. Like, we're regularly looking through, we used to get a large number of applicants who wanted to be part of the police force. But now if we get 12 applicants for a job, that's a lot. So we used to get like 50. That's not where we're at anymore. So there's just not enough money to pay police what they're worth. They lay their lives on the line on a daily basis. And so there's just not enough money.
Right. You brought up that we have 6 police officers yesterday in one of our presentations. And I started thinking about that. That's 6 people, 24/7 for a population of 5,000. That's definitely, I think, very thin the way you think about it. So
it's very thin, very thin. And I've told my kids this before, but in my family, we had a lot of ambulance calls. Growing up, it's not an exaggeration, 50, 60 ambulance calls to my house growing up. And always the police were the first ones there. So I'm on the police commission to advocate for that particular aspect of it. So we just don't have enough money to keep the police at the level that we need, but we do the best we can.
And just having that police presence, it's called visible deterrent.
Right.
And it works. It absolutely works. It's kind of the same logic. People whisper in church and don't swear in church because, you don't want God. But the cops are in that sense where, okay, we see that we have a safe and a policed society. We like that. It gives us more freedom, actually, by allowing them to supervise our behaviors. Right?
Violence in the media, I guess the first kind of thing that you talked about is, movie industry or things that you might see online, whether or not we want to continue to watch violence. I don't know, there's arguments of whether or not if you see violence on a movie, I mean, is that more conducive to cause somebody to go out and commit violence? I don't know, there's arguments on both sides. You can maybe think about your games that you guys play at home, and I know a lot of them are rated. Does that make us more violent in society? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, based on, like, there's a correlation, but meaning like, people who play video games, like, see violence a little bit differently, but they don't know if it's because someone has a violent demeanor that they do something. There is research on both sides, so I am not telling you that because you play video games you are going to go act violently against someone. There's more research that's done that says that's not the case. All right, so you need to know that is not the case, and I am not telling you that it is. But you will find anecdotal evidence. When I say anecdotal, that means like there are stories out there that seem to show proof of, but they are not proof. It's just a story, right? That people played a video game, then went out and acted violently. Okay, so there are people out there, and they're especially like my mom's age. My mom's 86. She's like, those dang video games, right? They're going to ruin the world. And she thinks, that's really a major problem. So, I don't know.
Right. When I was growing up, it was Ozzy Osbourne biting a head off a chicken. And then, so there was that, hey, I'll dare you to do that kind of thing. Being in Bloomington, it was kind of hard to get a live chicken. But the piece of violence in the media that we do have to, I think, be aware of is how fast communication happens through media now. And that can really spark some fires and whatnot. And when you have, the news reporting on, there's, a riot here or there or something, people are drawn to that. Hey, there's a riot. I can go profit from being hidden in these masses of people protesting and whatnot. You see much more of this across Europe, of course, than you see here. But, I'm going to go way back to Rodney King and the violence that happened after his trial, where there were riots in Los Angeles, and outliers profited from the violence because they could, break into stores easily because law enforcement was real busy with people protesting the Rodney King verdict.
It's just one thing that just kind of comes to mind, and this is the saying, you need to think, before you react to something or act on something. And I think that can cover a wide range of ideas, and that probably could cover this as well.
Something along the line of what Mr. Howden was saying is, just the other night I was watching an expose, all right, like a 2020 kind of thing. It wasn't 2020, but along that line. And they were discussing white supremacy and how that is on the rise. And as you mentioned, in Europe, there's a huge push to where there are groups that actually still honor Adolf Hitler. And there's several young people who using social media are like encouraging people to act violently. So it's maybe not because you're playing a video game that there's violence connected to the media, but there are people on social media that are calling people to become more violent against different groups, and that is on the rise.
I think there'll be that crime from poverty, but then you got to watch out because how is media, are they throwing gas on that fire, so to speak? And that's the piece with crime that we always have to be aware of.
And with all of the things that are happening in our world, domestic violence, alcohol-related violence, poverty, some of the, trends could show an increase because of the frustrations that are going on right now. So, it's something to better understand anyway. There's no single cause.
Absolutely, yeah. This is the point we were getting at, there's like I said, a ripple effect that occurs because of this. All right, let's move on here.
Sorry, chart on the slide, it's also in your book. It's the process in which one would go through as far as your due process, your rights that we all have. It's important that those rights are followed, that even as a criminal, you have rights. Police need to understand these rights. The court systems have to understand their rights. And this is always a check. And those are things that we had talked about with our court systems that we go through, and we have this process to make sure that all of our rights are protected in this country and under the Constitution.
I speak a lot in rule of law and in my civic section and whatnot, and I like this diagram because it shows you that rule of law. See, there is a method to our madness, if you will, and we have a due process and whatnot that I think is important in a civilized society. When this diagram breaks down, society is definitely heading towards chaos. Pop quiz. Woo-hoo! All right, question number 1. When is habeas corpus important?
When you've been arrested, you need to know why you're arrested.
Right, exactly. So you need to know that. Like, if you don't have habeas corpus, boy, are you going to feel like you have been ripped off.
And this is why in the Constitution, we have amendments that are put in the Constitution under the Bill of Rights that guaranteed our rights as citizens.
Right, and habeas corpus, of course, that Latin, right, for body of evidence, and that's what we have as citizens. We have a right to see the evidence of why we're being arrested for something. They can't just arrest us and not show us the evidence. All right. 2, how does the Constitution protect the right to a speedy and public trial by an impartial jury?
Okay, so you guys, the whole speedy trial thing, we would love to let you think that it is speedy, but a speedy trial can mean 2 years. Like, we are not talking like you are going to be done with this thing in 2 months. And many times, you might want it to take longer for a variety of reasons. You might be looking into, gathering your own investigative evidence and those kind of things. But the process is slow, and we want you to understand that. We don't want you to walk out of here feeling like, oh, it's that quick, because that is not the case. And it's just because the court system, there's the word bureaucracy, we've talked about that. There's just a lot of steps, and those steps are put in place to try to ensure that your rights are given to you.
Little current events here, and I know our local judge, Charlie Glassroot, for example, is talking about right now. I mean, if there is a trial with this COVID-19, how are we going to keep distances? How are we going to keep jurors and stuff from coming in? Are those jurors, in a sense, going to be, separated in a sense? How does that go through? I know there's a lot of discussion in our legal process, especially with the COVID-19 going around. How do we make this process work effectively?
And public trial, right now, we as individuals can't go into the courthouse, so it wouldn't necessarily be public. I know I've sent a couple messages to a couple people at the courthouse to get some information. I don't have all that yet, so I don't know exactly how that plays out. But the world we're living in at this moment can affect some of this.
Right, absolutely. And getting back to the speedy trial concept, remember that break-in that I talked to earlier on this presentation? From when the break-in happened to when there was a request, the courts asked me what restitution do I see as fair once they're into the sentencing phase and whatnot. Was, I'm going to say 16 to 18 months conservatively. And the gentleman that robbed me got a 47-month sentence plus time served. So it wasn't like the time he was in jail counted against his sentence. It was in addition to his sentence. And so the whole process was quite long. Have I gotten my restitution from this gentleman yet? No. Has it been a couple of years? Yes. But do I ever expect to see it? Not really, but it's there. And the only other time that I was involved in a crime, I did get restitution from it. And that whole process, again, was well over a year. So
Restitution, you mean payment?
yeah, restitution is, what were the monetary damages, basically. So we had to kind of inventory what was taken, what didn't we get back, and whatnot. So it's there. All right.
So what was the answer?
What's the answer? Oh, no self-incrimination, right? That's Fifth Amendment. I plead the Fifth. I don't have to rat on myself. Right to confront your witnesses. That's the habeas corpus, right? And right to assistance of counsel. That's upheld by the Miranda rights. That you get legal services to make sure that all of your rights are protected. There we go. I'm sure you guys thought of all three of those when you were thinking of this question. Way to go. Congratulations. All right. Guess what's on the next slide, everyone?
Graphic organizer. Woo!
All right. Once again, this is a good one. These are good. I'm kind of digging these. They're nice layout to keep all these things kind of in line. What's the difference between battery and assault and fraud and white collar versus blue collar crimes and whatnot? I like these pieces.
But we're going to let you look at them on your own, and we are going to sign off. You've probably heard us enough for one day, and we'll see you tomorrow.
There you go. Yeah, this one was a little longer, but I think this is really civics that really can impact you guys, more than even some of the federal processes and whatnot. So,
any questions? Again, just give us an email, drop us a note, and
check with your parents.
Check with your parents, and we'll get back to you.
All right. Have a good day.
Maybe they have a great story. Oh yeah, when I was your age.
Yeah, check your grandpa. Maybe he's got a good story. All right. Bye.
There you go. Bye.